Thank you very much for being willing to take part in this. We're real excited to talk with you. And Mike, I'm always excited to pull as much out of your brain as I possibly can. So, Ash Avildsen, founder and CEO of Sumerian Records, and Mike Mowery from 10th Street Management. Thank you both for being here. So, Ash, I'll start with you.
Good, Mike. Mike Mowery, 10th Street, just fucking throwing haymakers, dude. I love it.
There it is, baby.
That's great.
So, Ash, how is the coronavirus lockdown impacting your 2020 release schedule?
It's made it hard for us to shoot music videos because we can't really do crews, and we have to obviously abide by whatever the state social distancing laws are. Some bands are sheltering in place together, which makes it a bit easier, at least, to do some content. But as far as everything we already had like in the can, in the sense that it's already recorded, we haven't really pushed anything. We kept Palais Royale and Ask Alexandria's schedules both on lock for May, and then it'll really just depend. We're not moving anything because of the virus in the sense of like strategy of timelines. It's really just because literally we don't have the master audio recordings finished to put out.
Was that something that was that a conversation? Was it something that, I mean, I imagine your phone was ringing, you know, how did that that decision to just stay the course come about?
Some managers wanted to push and wait for tours to come back and to be able to, shoot different content. And I was pretty bullish with my approach, just telling everyone, I go, guys, the only thing we know for certain is that for the next couple of months, everyone's going to be sitting on their ass at home. So that's the only thing we know. And the other thing we know is that they're going to be watching TV and listening to music. So we can either be part of the solution or we can make people more stir crazy and withhold entertainment from them. So in the words of the prophet Kurt Cobain, here we are now, entertain us. So that's what we did.
Gotcha. And Mike, you didn't have anything coming out at this time, but what is your perspective as a manager and from the artist point of view that is different from the label's point of view when it comes to releasing music, especially during a time like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made on either side. I'm grateful that I don't have to have some of those difficult decisions. One of the reasons I'm excited to talk to a guy like Ash is for as long as I've known him, he seems to think differently than many other people. So if, I'm saying, let's look at, moving these things because of tours or whatever, I mean, he's going to have a label hat on, but he's worn so many other hats that, it's like, does the value of, as he just said, entertaining us make more sense than, okay, let's wait for a corresponding tour when really we don't have any clue when the tours are actually going to happen, right? There's things that are being moved or, that we don't know if they're going to happen or not. I mean, everybody's operating on essentially best guesses at this moment. I think as I have said previously, we've scrambled with the main artist I manage is Ice Nine Kills, and we had some content that, is ancillary that, so it's not a full album. It's not, I don't want to disclose what it is because none of the things that we've talked about have been announced yet, but this was stuff we were sitting on trying to make a plan during this album cycle to get out. And we're now reprioritizing because we've got it. There's nothing else that, as just as Ash said, like, let's get it out there. Let's give people something to pay attention to while they're, a captive audience, essentially.
Yeah. And just to, talk about on both sides of the coin, if it was a completely brand new band that had no base whatsoever, we might be a bit more reluctant. We probably would still, probably leave it up to the band at that point. But for bands that have an established base, I'm pretty firm in the belief that you should get it out there and be creative with how you can, create content to support the actual audio recordings. The touring thing's tough because you just don't know. And even stuff with radio, like we're having some of our best radio momentum right now with Ask Alexandria. And I'm just curious what the reach is. Me personally, I listen to the radio in the car and I listen to playlists at home. I don't know if that's a reflection of the majority of music fans, but I literally virtually never put the radio on at my house. That's when I listen to playlists. And in the car, I pretty much never listen to playlists. I just put the radio on. So that's one thing that's kind of I think a variable in all this is what does a radio campaign mean versus what it meant, a few months ago. It still means something, but I just don't think it carries as much weight. I think playlisting probably right now is the most important thing for new music discovery outside of, just creative content that goes viral and having a hit song that everyone's, sending their friends.
So when you say that playlisting is the best way for new music discovery, but you would still suggest for an artist who doesn't have an established base to maybe consider pushing back and waiting. Is that because touring is just such a big part of getting to that new music discovery that might even happen still on playlisting, or is it unassociated? It's just so big. How do you sort of?
Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that it's the be all end all. I don't mean that in an absolute way. It was more kind of just conversational rhetoric. Like I think as far as like a generic way of new ears getting on your stuff, that's probably the most like plug and play version. Obviously, if you have a song or a hook that goes viral on TikTok or Triller or some, clever video meme that has, a needle drop in it, like and the music plays right after the joke and millions of people are sharing it. There's a lot of other things that could be this explosive kind of catalyst to getting a bunch of new people to listen to a song. But as far as the the by the book industry, plug and play scenarios, I do think playlisting right now is super valuable. That and then peer to peer stuff. So if you have popular artists posting on their socials about another band, which is something we try and instill with Sumerian as far as interlabel promotions of other bands helping put each other over. In the words of pro wrestling, put each other over means like help them get over with the crowd, help them expand their brand and reach. So
you must have dropped. Like a half dozen things there. I'm taking notes on. I'm going to come back to you later. But go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
No, I mean, I was just going to say it's interesting. I mean, what I love about this time, right, is it allows us to, you and I have talked extensively, Paul, about like if we built the music business today without any of the history, would we do it the same way? And, now we're in this place where, I was talking about the charts with somebody yesterday and they asked what the band's sales were. And I said, really, I feel like we're almost at a point where nobody cares what the actual sales were. And, if I think back, part of the reason why I want a band to be on tour when a record comes out is, especially if you're on a support tour, if you don't have the fan base already, is, you've got a vehicle, you're in front of people, you can talk about the release, whatever. But really, it was about selling it, and it was all of the drivers that went along with that. If you were on tour, you could stop by and do an in-store. Okay, well, we've kind of pretty much gotten well past, there being any real steady stream of, in-stores available. And so, okay, if we go to selling something at the merch table, right? Like if I can sell 20 copies, that goes into my SoundScan, you do that times 30 dates, you got 600 copies, right? Well, as Ash will tell you, streaming is just as important, if not more, than those sales at this point. So,
well, especially because of the Billboard rule changes, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, and it really just allows you to like completely take that component out of it. So again, if you've got good songs, if you've got good content, if you've got all of the drivers that are ready to go anyways, the tour is sort of this, I'm not going to say it's completely antiquated, but it's like we base things off of that because that's what we've done as long as I've been in this business, is base things around tours. This might be this fundamental shift of us all realizing, yes, we need touring because it's an income driver, but, unless Ash has got bands in a 360 deal, he's not seeing the income from that show. So why does he care from a label's perspective, whether it comes out while on a tour or whether or not he can just make the best release strategy possible?
Well, that's interesting that you bring up the 360 deal, because I was wondering whether just the fact that the touring piece of the 360 deal has been so obviously impacted as far as label income for those labels that have the 360 contracts, whether that would discourage labels from doing 360 deals going into the future, or the opposite, because all the revenue has been impacted so more. Even labels that were before resistant to the 360 deals are going to be pushing for it more and more. What's your opinion on that, Ash? And has your perspective changed at all in the wake of this?
In regards to 360s, I don't think anything's really changed. It's just business as usual. Some bands are going to sign them because you're getting in with them very early when they don't have a lot of proven track record and they're not really making money. And other bands, whether there's a pandemic or not, if they're already popular or they have, a lot of different options and offers on the table, then they can, have more strength in negotiating to not have a 360 component. But to me, the biggest determining factor in that is just how early you get in on a band and how eager they are to get a label behind them to help build their career with them.
Well, a different perspective, however, I'm curious, let's say a band came to you. I presume many bands have come to you and said, hey, look, we just got our next 6 months of income wiped out, right? So either let's jumpstart the recording process, which means you've got to kick money in, or, hey, can you give us a loan? Because there's going to be future income, but your next royalty statement isn't until, royalty statements just came. The next one isn't until September, so does it allow you to say, hey, look, of course, I'm going to loan you some money, right? But I may want to be protected and participate in, a stream of income that you might not have had, whether it's touring or something else, in order to, be able to offer some of that support.
Yeah, there's definitely, look, the phone's, it's ringing off the hook with people looking for help. We were even going to shoot a funny video with, I love Bill Withers, God rest his soul, and Lean on Me is like the theme song right now for like artists calling their labels. Like, if you hear the song, the lyrics kind of say it all. And we were actually just going to sit here with a wad of cash and play the song in the background and shoot a fun video meme of like record labels with their artists during, COVID-19. But yeah, some bands are coming and asking, hey, I know, we're still on this album. Can we get the advance for the next record? Some ones are just asking for loans. And yes, and some of that will renegotiate to maybe extend the relationship, or what I think is the easiest way is say, look, you need more money, give me more songs. Go do some acoustics, do some covers, do some collaborations. The biggest thing they can do now is just be creative. And the big challenge with that, which is just literally like, as you got the mayor of LA telling people to snitch on their neighbors if they see them walking around, which I understand, both sides of that, but can you even record? It's one thing to do a live stream hanging out. It's another thing to be like, hey, here's our new single that has compromised sonic. That's been compromised sonically because we were not able to record it in the fashion that we normally would. So, those artists that can record themselves or have a producer, an engineer, a mixer that will actually come to their house and be creative, they definitely have an advantage right now. I had some bands writing some music for Paradise City, and it was actually Starbenders was doing a Chris Isaac cover, and that we literally got 1 day in the studio, and then the county was like, you can't record here anymore, and they got sent home. So it's challenging just to get music done right now, and I think that'll ease in a bit. I know it was a big victory last night that the Florida governor said the WWE is an essential business, so pro wrestling's being filmed again, and hopefully Nevada does the same thing for UFC. I think those things are important too, just for the morale of people. So if there's something that's live that's happening other than the news, but it's another combo.
What level of scrutiny are you? I mean, I know you as a guy that wants top quality, both in terms of the songs as well as the recordings. What level of scrutiny are you willing to let go during this time period? Not only on the content itself, but in thinking about a band and a release, I know you, like myself, one of the reasons we get along is we've got high expectations. Is there a sense, going back to that conversation of, some of your top bands releasing music, if it doesn't perform as well as you'd liked, how, is it sort of, you got this free pass in the back of your mind, like, well, we were all just under a virus, like, that's okay.
Well, I guess there's two things. There's the actual audio recording, which, some of the best songs are made in people's bedroom. Bad Guy, the hottest song of the past year was, Billy and Phineas in their bedroom. So opportunities are endless when it comes to actually creating if they know how to record. As far as results, streams and sales and all that, I don't think that COVID-19 really changes it all that much, honestly, because people are sitting home and they're listening, or they're going on a walk and they got headphones on. So
is your experience that overall streams, I would agree with you, we've got a captive audience, but I think my experience to date has been that streams are down individually, though maybe up as a whole. You could talk about your content consuming habits. I too listen to the radio in the car. I also don't watch a lot of TV normally, right? I'm on the go, I'm listening to music, I'm listening to podcasts now. I turn off of the work eventually. And the only thing, I don't want to look, all I want to do is watch a television show or, binge something on Netflix, watch Ozark. So can you comment, are you paying attention to the numbers as a whole on streaming, and are you seeing any patterns?
I'm seeing, okay, so a couple of things. For new music, if it's reacting, yeah, I'm seeing patterns. We're seeing great growth. We have a single right now called Lonely with Palais Royale. Their highest growth across all platforms, Spotify, YouTube Music Video, Shazam, everything. So for new music, if it's reacting, it's growing great. The one thing we've seen undoubtedly take a big dip is album sales. So transactional, obviously no one's going to whatever record stores are left right now, but as far as like buying albums digitally, we've seen a big dip. I think that's people going, oh, I love this band, I want to support them, let me spend $10 versus $10 is actually a lot more meaningful right now because the economy is in pieces until we recover. So transactional albums are definitely down. Streaming, catalogs down some, a little bit. And I think that's because people, you go to the gym, you listen to music. A lot of people listen to music in their car that is manually set up from their phone. So there's activities that, normally is when you're listening to music, you're not. You're at home and you're working on something else, or you're binge watching TV. I just went on an Ozark rabbit hole, which was fantastic. So there's things that are taking you out of your normal routine where you would be listening to that music. But I think ultimately, if you drop a new song and people are liking it, you're going to have wild success. The virus, in the sense of new music, is a double-edged sword. It could give you massive new growth because people like it and everyone's looking for something new to entertain themselves and pass the time. Or it could be like, I'm going to watch Tiger King. This album's not doing it for me,
So Ash, with the sales, the digital sales and physical sales being down, I would imagine it results in thinner margins for releases in 2020 than perhaps were projected or expected going in. Like, once this is done, are you looking at a more aggressive release schedule to make up for this in the months after? Are you thinking about shorter album cycles or going on a signing spree? Or is that none of that?
No. I mean, for the sake of this, video conference, it'd probably be great if it was some master thing, but it's just like, when the songs are ready, we're going to put them out. I think the biggest thing coming from this whole thing is just it exposed the music business that, as far as revenue, the whole thing is so lopsided on live. And this is something I've been stressing for years, and why I'm, resumed buildingbands.com. But, it's just, you don't know if this is going to happen once every couple of years. You don't know if your singer is going to get laryngitis and have to cancel everything. It's just way, way too dependent upon live touring. And now it's been exposed.
And I would imagine streaming is the way out of that, right? But the revenue side of it.
There, I mean, look, the royalty rate should be higher. You know, there's a lot of things happening that people aren't making a bigger deal about. You know, I don't want to politically point any fingers, but like there's certain audio streaming platforms that are music. And then there's audio streaming platforms that put everything in the pot that are not music recordings. And that dilutes the value of the recorded song to the songwriters and to the master right holders, the labels, everyone. So yes, royalty rates need to increase. All that stuff needs to happen, but there has to be other things that are music first on the internet for artists that generate revenue and give artists more control over their online presence and how that's monetized. Because right now it's a very, very broken system, and COVID-19 has drastically exposed how really pathetically dependent 90% of artists are on getting on stage and playing their songs to make a living.
So what are some of those streams that you're looking at, that you have been looking at?
Well, part of that's kind of giving away the whole bands.com business plan, but fundamentally, artists have tons of fans, and those fans will go where you tell them to go. And if you're willing to interact with them, they're going to do things. Now, right now, again, it's kind of like the repeating theme of like, there's nowhere for musicians that's truly for us, so we're going to go over here and interject ourselves onto Facebook, or we're going to interject ourselves onto Twitch, even though that's built for video games. But here we are, help us. There's nothing set for the fucking artists, and really that's because the big boys have allowed Silicon Valley to run it, and everyone's hyper focused on what they already have instead of thinking about what do the artists really need to have more control and to have more leverage and power in how they're able to make a living. And honestly, it's us as in the industry who needs to really, I think, take total responsibility for that, because the artists, their job is to make great art and to go to work. Their job is not to build Spotify before someone outside of the music business builds Spotify. You know, all these things that work on, Twitch, all this stuff, it's not from the music business. From other places, they're like, oh, look, music business, let's go make money off them, And it's kind of embarrassing, honestly. It's honestly very embarrassing that the music business, from the people that are inside it, the record labels, the managers, the agents, that we have not made our own platforms and our own revenue streams for the artists that are not dependent upon third-party tech companies to pay us. It's embarrassing.
So is it a matter of better getting more of the money from the source and less of it going to the platforms? Or is it a matter of finding new ways and new sources of revenue?
It's a combination of the two. One of it is just being like the low-hanging fruit. Like let's talk about lyrics, Mike. And this isn't a loaded question because I don't have the fucking answer either. How much money are you making right now on people looking up Ice Nine Kills lyrics on the 27 different lyric websites that are getting millions of hits weekly from not just your band but all bands? What are we getting from that?
Yeah, zero.
Who knows?
Absolutely nothing.
Who knows?
Right.
They probably owe us both money, and we're gonna have to go, hire an attorney and do a bunch of stuff that takes our eye off the ball of actually building the artist's careers. Going, hey, wait a second, some lyric site owes us money. And you had 100, the tour date site. They don't technically owe us anything, but we're not getting paid from bands in town. Bands in town's asking us to pay them to promote our fans that we put into their system. It's endless. Every element of the business is like that on the internet. The only places that are fundamentally where revenue is coming from, we're getting royalty rates from the music streaming and YouTube videos. And if you have a website and you're selling t-shirts and stuff, all that, that's cool. But there's this whole other world that really, like, you know, you look at what influencers are able to do, like YouTube, for instance. I give this example. And I think from what's going on now, artists are going to be more proactive in this. But, like, you know, the main thing artists can monetize on YouTube are their songs and their music videos. But you guys know it takes 2 years to get 10 or 12 good songs, right?
Yeah.
With a YouTuber, they can say, hey, look, I'm hanging out in my cabin in quarantine, That's the video for today, and the video for tomorrow is going to be this. Now, doesn't mean the artist can't do that. Some artists, I know some athletes are doing it. They're constantly creating content that can monetize. Even if it's fractions of pennies, it all adds up. But the music business on the internet is very, very exposed right now because, like, it started this conversation. The artists are calling the labels looking for help. And the labels are going, okay, well, of course we want to help you guys, but what's in it for us other than the artists being happy that they can lean on their labels? And a lot of times there's nothing in it other than maintaining a great relationship. And, you know, as Mike and I both know, we toured in vans. We know the grind. It's like, it's very powerful when you can call your manager or your management company or your label and get them to help you. I know a lot of managers dig deep in their own pockets and credit cards to float artists if they're, you know, financially stable enough to do so, and hope that they get it back. And that's, you know, those are challenging things, but I do think that there is a big solution, and that solution is going to be a new platform that is by the music business for the music business.
Well, you touched on something there that I'd like to ask both of you, and it's that idea that there are athletes and celebrities and musicians who are creating content that isn't necessarily their athletic prowess, their acting, for example, or songs, but they're leveraging their brand as a way to generate some income. So, like you said, you can't write a song every day and put out a new video for every song, but you could leverage your brand to put out a video every single day that can then be monetized to a degree. So I guess a question to both of you, and Mike, if you can go first, sort of like, what does this, what we're talking about and what Ash is bringing up here about the disappearance of the dependable source of income, the touring, just further expose the need for bands to develop and leverage their brands better?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the most challenging thing, right, for many of us is, you know, Ash, I love what his ideas. I've talked to him about it many, many times. You know, the challenge is the reason, in some senses, why others have built the platforms is those of us and releasing the material, doing all of this.
Go back 5 seconds. Don't have the audio there.
Oh, I don't know what. We all good?
Yeah, we got you now.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I guess this gives me the opportunity to answer the question first, right? The question is, are we able to go and look at the band as a brand more so? Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I've always tried to do as a manager is do that with the existing tools that are available. You know, I'm an entrepreneurial spirit, but while I'm making sure that the car continues to go down the road 75 miles an hour because all the other cars are going down the road, some of them 60 miles an hour, some of them 90 miles an hour, and we're trying to keep up and figure out how to jockey into position, it's really hard for me to look under the hood, figure out whether or not the engine's running the right way, whether or not I got the best transmission, whether or not the tires need to be rotated, right? So this gives us, for the first time, me as a professional, as a manager, who've done this 15 plus years, the car stopped. It's not really moving. So we can go in and look at all of this stuff, analyze it, figure out what can be improved, what can be replaced. And ultimately what Ash is talking about is, you know, I guess building a better motor system, right? A better highway And what I can say is I'm focusing on, the brand stuff, understanding that the existing highway is the existing highway. I love that there's somebody thinking about, is there a better highway for it? But ultimately, I think bands have wanted to do this. Managers want to do this. The business wants a better business. The challenge is, again, how do you, when you're trying to keep things moving, how do you find the pause to be able to build that better business?
So Ash, any thoughts on that, on band versus brand? Are you talking to your artists at all about how to leverage their brand better?
Yeah, I mean, some are, like I said, a lot of the harsh reality right now is what are they actually able to do? Are they in 5 different locations? Blink 182 just did a very clever video that was all the different members playing on their own and then intercutting it with fan submitted footage, and they made a really fun music video that I thought was very well done. But yeah, you just have to be as active as you can. I mean, look, the good news is you got an iPhone most likely. I still don't have a new one, shame on me, but the new one's camera's brilliant. There's things you can do to keep people entertained. But I think, the biggest takeaway from this is what else can you do besides get on stage to make money and make your band bigger? And that's really what we're forced to think about from a creation standpoint and from just like a harsh reality of the music business standpoint, and it's not up to Mike to figure that out, or to any of us as individuals, but it's definitely the ones, especially the ones that are owning the labels and the management companies that do have liquidity, and do have the relationships to band together and figure out those solutions. I sat with this. There's going to be a documentary that comes out to help ramp up what we're doing with bands.com. But in the past year and a half, I sat with some of the most powerful people in the music business, the heads of their department, the CEOs of certain companies, and I didn't know it was going to be a pandemic. My thing was, what if somebody gets sick? What if they have a loved one get sick? What if tours are going to go away because of things outside of our control? Never thought it was going to be the virus, though. I never saw this one coming like that. But I sat with these people and I said, what do we have, digital asset wise and digital platform wise that we truly can control and be prepared, instead of relying on Silicon Valley and all these third parties to do it for us. And again, I don't want to spoil what's actually going to be done properly in this doc, but nobody cared. Nobody cared. It's probably very similar, and I'm not comparing myself to him, but just from reading about the music business, it's probably very similar that what Steve Jobs went through when he was like, hey guys, iTunes. The flip side to COVID is record labels. If it was 20 years ago, they'd probably be in a lot more trouble, even though there was so much money back then. But no one's going to Tower Records in the middle of a pandemic to go get a new album. The silver lining in all this is now, kind of for the first time, truly, record labels being 95% digital actually is a fantastic safety net for what's going on. Again, I'm supposed to say this for the doc, but Mike used to manage my band, and he's fantastic. So I'll say here first in case. So this way, at least it's time stamped in case anyone else says they were the first to say it. What Napster and digital before there was iTunes, what Napster did to the record business, COVID-19 has done to the live music business, and we were not prepared digitally the way we should have been. And we're scrambling in the middle of the pandemic to figure it out. Instead of going, oh, all tours are grounded. No problem. This is what we're going to do instead. And we were completely caught with our pants down. And that's, to me, again, that's what's embarrassing, because live music, things happen. People go people get sick. People go on hiatuses. They go to AA meetings, as we saw with Metallica and a lot of the festivals with Wimmer. There's all these unpredictable things that can happen. The difference is, obviously, Metallica is going to be fine because they have an incredible body of work and they're one of the biggest and best bands of all time. But again, for the mid-level bands, which is the majority of the business, they're scrambling. They're calling me and Mike going, what do we do? What do we do? And another thing that was mentioned in the meetings with these very, very powerful executives was, well, the platform you're talking about, creating, Beyonce's not going to use that. I go, it's not for the top 3%. If they want to come hang out, that's great. It's for everybody else that is like, oh my God, people can afford Adidas and Converse. Not everyone can afford Gucci or Louis Vuitton. That doesn't mean that an Adidas store in the same shopping mall as the Louis Vuitton store ain't going to do great. And so there's been a very big disconnect with the powers that be and the section of the music business that is not the top 4%. And now it's wildly exposed. It's wildly exposed.
I'm thinking of, I think it's a Dennis Miller had a joke right after Napster when it was a Steely Dan won album of the year, and he made a joke that their album sales jumped only because all their fans were too old to know how to download it for free. And it was like 10 years after Napster before, or longer, before it really felt like the record business figured out digital in any way, shape, or form. It was a long slog. And so I'm curious as to whether as technology makes things faster, is it possible that the industry can figure out whatever is to draw the parallel with coronavirus to live? Will it take that long for the music business to figure out what that solution is for revenue to replace the live circuit?
All of Ash's programmers are sitting at home with nothing better to do than continue to hammer away at his site. So I guess I guess we're going to be all right. I'm almost thinking that maybe a record label started this thing. What the heck?
Yeah. Actually, we have a lot of our team is in the U.S., but we do have some of our programmers are in Belarus, and it's pretty wild what the president of Belarus recently said about the virus. It's pretty incredible when you look at what's going on country to country. Obviously, some countries are treating it the same. The Belarus president, I read, and maybe he's changed it in the past couple of weeks, he was like, we don't need to do anything. It's better to, and I don't agree with what this disclaimer, okay? So I do not agree with what the Belarus president said. He goes, it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees, and all we need is saunas and vodka, and we're not stopping for nothing. Wow. And then you look at what's going on in Venezuela. We got a $15 million bounty on the president of a civilized country by us. Drug trafficking. That's insane, dude. Like, wow. So it's crazy what's going on around the world. But yes, we have a team that is working diligently, and hopefully we're going to be able to unveil it this year. And one interesting thing that came up with all the people involved, I was like, oh, we should scramble and just launch the beta and go because, live streaming. I go, guys, we're not changing the strategy of how we roll this out because of COVID-19. The coronavirus is here to remind us our mission and why it's so important. The disaster we're facing from a business standpoint is the ultimate vindication for what we've been saying for the past few years as I tried to go and raise money to do this, because I've never done a full-on tech venture, and it's a very expensive business. And one of the best ways to blow all your money is doing a startup. So I have to be incredibly calculated and careful to not make a big mistake. But a lot of them thought we should just scramble to go. I go, no. This is just a reminder and a vindicator. This is not a strategy changer to rush. I go, Twitch exists. There's other things, there's Instagram Live, there's YouTube Live, There's other places they can do that. Live streaming is just one small component of the overall mission that we're doing. But yeah, I mean, there's a high level of panic and urgency from all angles of trying to figure out what to do. I saw Triller just announced like this massive online music festival with like huge rappers and a bunch of pop stars, and that'll be interesting to see how many people tune in. But again, it's like the solution isn't just like, oh, now we can live stream. I actually believe there is a delusional level with how people think there's this insane appetite for live music on the internet pre-COVID-19. I've sat with some other companies that are already going, some companies that are publicly traded that are in the live music video business. And I don't think there is that big of a demand for that. And maybe COVID changes that to a degree. But the challenge is, this one company was like, oh, well, we're like the ESPN of live music. And they were very bullish. I go, I'm sorry, but that model's not real. And they go, what are you talking about? They're like, Beyonce at Coachella streamed millions and millions. And it was just huge. I go, yeah, that was an incredible performance. And it is one of the biggest artists in the world at the biggest festival in the world. I was like, there's also a level of anomaly in general. I go, right now, a teenage girl that grew up homeschooled by her progressive parents in LA is the hottest act in the world. Do you know how many other parents have a teenager who they think should be the biggest act in the world? It's the exception to the rule. Live music, going to the event is amazing. Listening to a recording the way the artist intended it in a studio is amazing. Live streaming a concert, well, yes, it's cool. It's not this game-changing scenario because the audio recording is not as good as the studio version, and the experience isn't as great as actually being there. So they go, yeah, but it's the ESPN of live music. You don't get it, Ash. I go, no. You don't get it. Because here's the difference between watching sports on ESPN. Every game, even if it's the same two teams playing against each other, every game's different. I love Guns N' Roses. They play hundreds of shows. How different is each set list? Yeah, they switch out songs here and there. They ain't switching out 30 songs. It's not a completely different show date to date. An artist set at Download Festival versus their set at Sonic Temple, yeah, there'll be changes, but it ain't going to be changes that you see in sports games.
Well, if they're not going on tour, they've got all the time in the world to figure out all those songs and readjust their set lists.
Well, one of the things, I'm sorry, Mike, what I was going to say is just that Ashley brought up this great point about the idea that live streaming is not the be-all, end-all. Now, I'm spending a lot of time because I always have worked from home. I always will, pop on the TV with whoever's live streaming. What I've found interesting is that there are artists who I know would pack theaters and were huge 10, 15, 20 years ago who had almost no online presence, and they do a live stream because they're stuck in a room and there's 4 people there along with me. And then there's somebody else who couldn't bring in half as many people 10, 15, 20 years ago, but has been really active digitally. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people there every time they turn on their camera. And so it really, to me, kind of exposed that idea that it isn't just like, okay, once a year I'm going to pop on. It really is an investment. But then again, it's like, is the payoff even worth it? I mean, Mike, you got a perspective on that at all?
Well, I mean, look, this conversation turned drastically different than what I was expecting, which is one.
Oh, go back to the script. I'm sorry.
No. This is great. I think it's educational. I mean, the interesting thing to me, right? Like, I don't know, but there was a point in time that people were saying, well, you can't ever replace an album. A piece of vinyl with the artwork that goes along with it, with the, the groove and the feel of the analog, that was the only way for them to experience whatever they were experiencing, right? And that's because there was an idea of how that got ingrained to them when they were a certain age. And so to me, look, I agree. I don't think that we're going to, in 2020, COVID or not, replace live shows with live streams. I do think that there will continue to be emerging technologies that allow us to experience everything differently, right? Like as soon as I can, interact, if I get into a VR where I'm not having to wear a headset necessarily, but RIP Google Glass, but wear something that's a little less ridiculous, and I get to choose my own adventure in a set, right? Like I bought season tickets to a soccer team once, and the best thing about it was going down to figure out what seat I wanted to sit in. Put on a pair of goggles, and I could sit in any seat in the house and figure out what I was willing to pay based on that view. That was something that as a kid I would have never thought was possible, right? How awesome would it be if Ash has got a new release by Palais Royale, and go back to choose your own adventure books. Somehow through this video, I can choose whether or not I'm in the car with the band. I haven't seen the video, so I don't know if there's a car, but the promo shot looks good and there's a car there, or I'm the singer of the band, right? So to me, there's so many things that are possible. I don't know if any of these are in the works. I have to imagine that, some of them are. So I don't know if that answers your question. Ultimately, what I always try to do, right, is I'm hopeful that the industry will continue to adjust and adopt. I think, Paul, you are correct in the fact that things will get sped up, right? Unless, who knows what happens next? Ash is talking about shows not happening because of laryngitis. Well, some of them weren't happening because of, terrorist attacks. What happens if something crazy happens and it takes out the internet? Right? We are in a very fortunate position that we're being asked to stay at home, and I can sit here with, two of my favorite people in the world and do this. If I was forced to not be able to do that, right, because technology didn't exist or the internet went out and all of a sudden I'm back to doing something like reading books, I might go crazy, right? So that's a little rambly, but ultimately, and I love this bigger picture conversation, which I should have expected I would get out of someone like Ash. But the other flip side of it all to me, his genius is the guy's developed artists time and time and time again. And part of what we do here at Outerloop Coaching is develop artists, right? We give them the tools. So he's talking about building a tool that will help all artists, not the top 2, 3, 4%. It's going to help everybody down. I'm curious, in the model that either he's envisioning or in the current state of affairs, what's that nugget of advice to, the artists that has no audience, that was, going through our workbooks that say, hey, if you, grow your social media, we talk about with our band being a brand, right? So what is it that for those bands in their infancy, is it stay the course? Is it do something different? What's getting Ash Avildsen's attention for something that isn't a signed artist?
Okay, so one of the shows we're doing for the relaunch of Hit Parader as the digital media entertainment vortex, kind of similar to what Complex has done for urban and sneaker culture. We hope Hit Parader would do for rock and roll and alternative. We're doing a show called No Cover, which is essentially a competition show for unsigned artists, and the hook is you can't play a cover song, you have to play originals. So it's a panel of celebrity judges and all these prizes and all this stuff, and it's televised. And the way we're letting bands sign up is through 3 ways. And the 3 ways we're doing it, I wanted it to be very authentic and real to how the music business really works, right? So here are the 3 lanes. First lane is online voting. You have so many fans and the IP addresses check out that, wow, look at the demand for this band. And that's going to get you on the powers that be radar. Funny story, this show is also inspired by Jimmy Iovine and Matt Pinfield's Farm Club. That was on the USA Network, 99-2000, where Kitty and Chimera and a number of different bands broke off of. And back then, I remember, because I was in an unsigned band in my first year in college, they didn't have an IP tracker. I think the band was Sev from DC, Maryland, Virginia. Remember them? And they just voted themselves on repeatedly on the site because there's no IP tracker.
Oh, the good old days.
The good old days. But that was a great show. And it was ahead of its time. It was brilliant. So that's one lane. You have so many fans online. You get high level voting. Everyone's like, oh, we got to pay attention to this band. The second lane is you're cool. The tastemakers are like, hey, we think this band should get on. And that's when agents, managers, labels, publicists, journalists, playlist programmers, local radio stations, any type of gatekeeper or tastemaker says, hey, you should check out this band. That's lane 2. And then lane 3, which is the real harsh reality that is probably the best advice I can give for unsigned bands that are trying to figure out, which is like work multiple jobs. I worked my ass off doing different jobs to get money to invest into my own band until we were on people's radar. The third lane is they have money. And that's the harsh reality. They have money to promote themselves to get onto a platform. I think it's probably the best example recently is I want to say, and I've never worked with the band, but I believe I Prevail used their own money to do Facebook and social media boosted posts to boost up their Taylor Swift cover to then get on everyone's radar. So it's kind of genius. It's like they invested in themselves and they did a cover song, and they didn't turn out to be an Alien Ant Farm scenario. So kudos to them and their team because they have a great career now, and their original compositions have transcended any of the covers that may have helped launch them. But they took it upon themselves to get their name out there. So to an unsigned band who maybe doesn't have all the online votes going or big numbers, they don't have big streams, and they don't have relationships or momentum with tastemakers, well then work around the clock, man. You deliver Uber Eats. You come up with all the money you can so you can shoot a music video. And then with that music video, you can turn the meter on. When I say turn the meter on, you're investing in getting eyeballs on it, just like if you were on a record label. Because the best way for an artist to find out if their art's working, put money behind it and see if it moves the needle. If you're putting a bunch of money behind something and the needle ain't moving, guess what? It ain't working. Try again. Write a new song, do a new video.
To go around the world, to get back to touring, right? Lane 3, and I don't want to expose, this, what I love. It sounds like a great idea, but can you recall any one band that's bought onto a tour, so they've used their money to put that behind it, that's broken out? As a guy that used to put package tours together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't want to reveal anyone's history if that artist isn't or those artists aren't willing to let people, they don't want that to be known. I won't speak for the artist, but Mike and I can both tell you firsthand several artists who had either themselves or their record labels or their investors buy them on to tours, even when they'd meant some tickets on their own, but nature of the beast, headliner, their manager's like, we want our bus paid for, or we want, $20,000 to go towards marketing or whatever it is. And I've firsthand done that for multiple different Sumerian acts, and those acts made the investment worth it. And that's a great analogy, because if you get bought onto a tour for $20,000 and you just played 30 sold out shows and nothing has changed, you got to look in the mirror, like figuratively, not literally. You have to look, okay, we just got this big platform. None of our numbers have gone up. Did it mean anything? And yes, it's the reality. It's like money moves the needle if your art's good.
Like, all right, so 2 questions. One, let me start with the one that you're touching on first. Like, one of the things I hear about all the time is like a band saying, okay, we've saved up some money. There's a booking agent who says that they'll put us on a tour if we buy on. How much should we spend? And how do we know whether it's going to be a good opportunity or a bad opportunity? What would you tell an artist who hasn't done that before as to how they decide how much to spend and how to decide what kind of a tour to buy onto?
Well, for the one low price of $499 per hour, I will get out my crystal ball and I will tell the unsigned band, get out your parents' checkbook and let's look into it. No, I'm just kidding. There's no way.
Exclusively brokered by Outerloop Coaching. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, you have to speak with my agency, please. Look, no one's got a crystal ball, right? Nobody bats 1,000. But people with good batting averages, obviously, they know what they're doing to a certain degree. I like to think Mike and I both have pretty good batting averages. I don't think there's a specific mathematical equation that you can plug and play and say, how much money is this tour worth? The biggest thing is how much are you willing to sacrifice to get some answers about your art? So if you think, hey, we sound like band A and band A is going on tour and they'll take a check, you know, go play their shows and see if anything happens, if you can afford what they're asking. The flip side of that, though, is on the artist side, I'm wildly against buy-ons unless the band does mean something. You know, in the cases of that Mike and I have dealt with buy-ons to tours, even when we're helping an artist get this tour with a buy-on, it's usually an artist that actually does mean something, but there's 10 artists that mean something that want that one spot. So, you know, the money can be the differential in who gets chosen. I'm very, very opposed to a band who has zero going on, who is just painfully aware when you see their logo on the tour poster going, how on earth are they there? And, you know, it's usually because of a buy-on. That, to me, I always think is kind of tragic in the sense that the artist should have put someone who has already built up a base get the opening spot instead of having it be what literally we call a throwaway or toss-away slot. I don't think such thing even exists unless, you know, you're a band that draws thousands of people and you're doing an underplay and playing, you know, 400 or 500 cap rooms and everything's going to sell out in a day or two, so it doesn't matter who's opening. But anytime you're actually going into shows that aren't going to sell out in the first 48 hours and it's going to be, you know, weeks and weeks of moving ticket sales, throwing someone on there for some money, you know, I don't know. I don't think it's the best strategy.
Couple things that come up for me. You know, the thing is, Ash and I both know there's no, you know, formula, just as he talks about, you know, the anomaly of Billie Eilish being homeschooled and recording her single in her bedroom with her brother. You know, when we talk about these opportunities, which oftentimes do cost money, you know, each band has to have some sense of, you know, it might not be revealed exactly what came of that opportunity until later down the road, right? Sometimes it isn't exactly what you're expecting. You might meet somebody that it takes 3 or 4 years for that to pay off. Ash and I have both seen countless examples of that. And I think that the most challenging part is only the artists themselves, if they're the ones investing, right? Just as Ash as a label, he's got to know when he is willing to double down on his investment or whether or not he's going to pull back.
Know when to hold him, know when to fold him, baby.
And the challenge is, right, we've both been involved with things that we folded on, that inevitably they, you know, maybe that was the thing that ignited something within the artist, but they found their way through in other places. And there's been things that we've doubled down on that sadly all the indicators were there and something else didn't matter. So I think to, you know, anybody listening that's new, it's really hard to know, you know, and that's where, again, Ash talks about his experience. He's done it enough times. He sat at the poker table enough times. But, you know, one of the real things to me, you know, when you go back to the show that you're developing and, you know, I don't know what the premise is. It doesn't really matter. You know, ultimately, yeah, you get in through one of 3 doors or 3 lanes, as you say. And, you know, I'm curious because I've watched Ash take artists who had something. He identified something in them. I don't necessarily know exactly what it was. And then he got in and worked with them in order to make that band into what they, you know, then launched with. And had he, you know, so is it he saw their image? Is it that he heard a song, you know, and then went in and did his tweaking? So I'm curious, Ash, you know, coming out of, you know, that television show or even just, you know, the show aside, oh, sorry guys. Coming out of the show aside, right? Like, what is the thing that ultimately, sorry, I got a call, which wasn't expecting to come through. You know, what is it that you're trying to find, right? Are you trying to find a great song? Are you trying to find a great front man? Are you trying to find?
Well, not front man, but the whole band. But that's literally I've been asked this question enough times that I'm like, can I streamline and just like cut right to the chase? And this is going to sound so just, I'm the record label guy, I'm the star maker. But like the fucking reality is, and I've made decisions to sign bands. Two I'll give examples of. So there's two lanes. There's a hit, which is like the songwriting side. And it doesn't mean that they actually have the hit, but you see the potential of the songwriting. And you go, wow, they actually can, that's a great riff, that's a great vocal hook, that's a great lyric, it's a great melody. There's the cold, hard songwriting, which we'll put on the hit side. The second thing, and one or two, they're interchangeable. The second one is the it factor, which is star power, which you can't really, it's hard to talk about what it is because it's literally this thing. And Born of Osiris, when they were called Rosecrans, and granted they were an underground progressive metalcore band in a small Legion Hall, so it's a different kind of environment and sound as the next band I'll reference. But I saw them, and in the first 5 seconds of them playing and seeing the energy and the magic, I looked at my employee that was with me, and I go, this is it. We're going to sign him. Knew in the first 5 seconds. Palo Real is another one. I drove out and saw them. They were on a tour called High School Nation. They were playing at like lunchtime at a high school out in like Fullerton. And I had already seen their video and heard their songs, which got me to the show. Same thing with Born of Osiris. I heard the music and go, oh, this is a lot of potential. Let me just see that they are live. First 5 seconds of the first Palais song, when they turned it on, they started going. I looked at Nick Walters, who's A&R Sumerian. I go, we got to do it. Just fucking immediately knew it. And then that doesn't mean it's like, again, it's not all or none. There's bands that you see that and they have this incredible star power, but they don't end up having the songs. And then you have bands that are incredible songwriters, but they don't have the it factor live, and you have to develop that. So it's not like you see it or you hear it out of the gates and then it just turns on and the label goes boom and the band's popular. It's still a long process, and it's very rare that you find both of them at first look.
That it factor is only live, or can it be captured at all in video and streaming and all the rest of it?
No, there's definitely music videos. I mean, again, two great examples. Two of the most iconic bands of our lifetime, probably of all time, Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. They both broke on music videos and MTV. I remember exactly where it was. Both bands. The first time I saw a Welcome to the Jungle video, which is literally how the band broke, label was going to shelf the record. Tom Zutaut talks about the interviews. Geffen, it wasn't selling. They had only sold a couple 100,000 at the time, which was like, a couple thousand now. And it was dead in the water. And Tom went right to David Geffen and said, you have to get this music video played on MTV. It's going to be the biggest band in the world. And Geffen pulled a favor at MTV. They played it at like 2 or 3 in the morning one time. And Geffen told Tom, that's all you're going to get. You're going to get one spin. Tom's like, no, it's got to be in daily rotation. And He goes, that's it. You're going to get played one time in the middle of the night. And Tom sat with the guys when they were in a small apartment in Hollywood. They played in the middle of the night. Boom, fucking melted the soundboards. Back when like there were like circuit boards for landlines, and if too many calls come in, I guess there's like some electrical response to that. And that's what happened. And it was literally that. And then Nirvana, same thing. Nirvana had put out Bleach. It wasn't, it had some momentum, but it wasn't, they weren't printing, success. And Smells Like Teen Spirit came on MTV. I remember exactly where I was. Turned on. I was on actually a BBS, a bulletin board system. It was like kind of the origins of the internet. And I was talking in a chat room, and I was like, dude, turn on MTV. There's this guy, and they're in this gym, and there's these weird cheerleaders, and this janitor is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And boom, that was it. So to answer your question, yes, the star power can absolutely come through a good music video. And it honestly, it doesn't even have to be, the Welcome to the Jungle and the Smells Like Teen Spirit videos are very world building. Like you really feel like in those videos that you're stepping into the world of this band. So I would say that live, you can just kind of see it and feel it. In a music video, my advice to artists would be like, hey, they might not get me and Mike at a show, but maybe they can get in our inbox. Bring us into your world. And that doesn't always require a bunch of money in the music video. Yes, you could just be in a warehouse or in front of a green screen and go, we're rocking out. I've seen it a million times. What is your world, right? Like the music video that you're trying to introduce, that should be your theme park. You know, you go to Disneyland, you go into the Star Wars place, you're in Star Wars, and like you could be a 2-year-old or an 80-year-old. You're like, wow, look at this. So utilize whatever your world is as a band and build that visually, because that can be the difference between someone going, oh my God, I got to keep watching this, and oh yeah, song's okay, they're rocking out in the warehouse. Oh, you know, he twirled his hair. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think I would, you know, I mean, that's fantastic advice. And I would say, you know, it's really challenging, you know, again, going back to a car metaphor, and you're just a band trying to figure out, you know, where you exist in your world, let alone what your world looks like. And, you know, I think that's why people like Ash, because he can sort of see that and has seen what works and can bring that out of bands. So, you know, try to figure out the way to bring that out of yourself. And some of it just takes time. You know, look at Ice Nine Kills. I think they've been trending in the right direction, but when Spencer figured out the way to make it his world, it really popped.
Yep.
You guys are great. Thank you very, very much for all of your time. This is some just idea bombs. I think people are going to be going crazy on this. So this is awesome. So thank you very, very much, Ash. Much appreciated. Thank you for, you know, all the great music over the years. Thank you for bringing it all to us. We really appreciate it. And Mike, same as well. Thank you very, very much.